Hello, everybody. We're going to get started. Thanks for coming. I know it's the last time slot of the conference. I figured everybody would be off on trains and planes and whatever by now. It's nice to see a nice good-sized group here, so welcome. My name is David Black. I'm going to be talking about the 11th thing, generalists, specialists, and how life imitates the decathlon. I'm going to start with the traditional little slide about myself. I've been using Ruby since 2000, and I should add, this isn't really specifically a Ruby talk. In fact, it's not a very technical talk, as you'll see, but I identify a lot as a Rubyist, and I've been using Ruby since 2000. I'm a pickaxe baby, which for those of you who don't know means that I discovered Ruby through the Pickaxe book, which is the programming Ruby book by Dave Thomas and Andy Hunt, the pragmatic programmers. It came out in 2000. It has a pickaxe on the cover, so it quickly became known as the Pickaxe. So there's a whole generation of us that discovered Ruby in sort of 2000, 2001 through this book. I work at Cyrus Innovation in New York City. I'm also an author. I've written a couple of books, most recently The Well-Grounded Rubyist. I'm a co-founder back in 2002 of Ruby Central, which is the parent organization of RubyConf and RailsConf, the official international conferences for Ruby and Rails. And I'm also the chief author of scanf.rb. How many of you use Ruby, by the way, since I'm chattering about Ruby? How many of you knew that Ruby had scanf? Yeah, well, all right, it does. It's really, I mean, I like to tell people because hardly anyone knows, so it's quite useful too. All right, as I said, today's talk is not a technical talk particularly. We're going to sort of ease you out of the conference with some metaphors, some analogies, some thoughts, some even a little advice, a little bit of sort of meditation on some technical sphere things, but not specifically about one language or one technology. So I have a very short couple of bullets here that just sum up rather sort of bluntly what I want to cover, or what has kind of motivated me in preparing the talk, and hopefully will come through in the talk. As technical people, are we generalists and or specialists? The answer is probably yes at some level, but sort of which are we? And do we get to decide? That's a question I'll come back to. I think there's some real issues around that. And finally, is it okay? Is whatever we're doing along these lines, is it all right? Is it good? Is it what we want to be doing? Is it what we have to be doing? And so we're going to be looking to a large extent at the field, the technical field, the field of IT, of computer work, however you want to define it exactly, and talk about exactly how we sort of position ourselves in relation to the technologies, whether we're generalizing, whether we're specializing, and what exactly is at stake. It seems to me that our field is what I would call quasi-fractal. Now I say quasi because if it were really fractal, the sort of illustration I'm about to present would go on forever. I don't think it goes on forever. It goes on for a couple of iterations. But let me tell you what I mean. The world sees a specialist, computer programmer, and we've all had that experience, especially if you're talking to somebody who isn't in the field, and they say, what do you do? What are you? I'm a computer programmer, software developer, IT expert, whatever. You kind of summarize it in one lump thing, and that comes across itself as a specialization. However, when we see computer programmer, or what we do, whatever it may be exactly, we actually see something very general, something very kind of sprawling. And here I've just listed off the top of my head about 10 or 12 of the many, many technologies that various of us have crossed paths with at various times, and we could each make our own list, and it would probably be a lot longer. So we're sort of, a black box, so to speak, to people who are not in the field, but within the field, we're actually generalists. We're actually doing a lot of different things. And even if you move in closer, this is my fractal argument, you can move in at least one stage closer. If you look at, for instance, Ruby, if you say I'm a Rubyist, again, that's a little bit of a black box. What you really mean is I understand Ruby syntax and perhaps something about garbage collection and writing C extensions and different versions of Ruby and different things built with Ruby and so forth. So there's a whole ecosystem there that if you kind of peel the black box away, you suddenly become sort of a generalist who's, yes, you're doing one thing, Ruby, but you're actually doing a lot of different things. Now again, I'm not going to push the fractal argument. I'm not going to say if you look at, Ruby garbage collection, you'll see 40 different nuances. I mean, it doesn't go on forever, but it is true that you have this kind of recurrent pattern of the black box, but if you know enough, it's not really the black box, and that goes on for, I think, at least a couple of iterations in our field. And the result is that there is always rather a long list of things we're actually doing, and that in turn raises questions of what our level of expertise is, what our level of interest is. That's another, I think, another important issue. But definitely proliferation of tools is the norm. In other words, what we see around us is constantly new tools. Change is definitely the norm, whether it be something new or new versions of something or modifications of something. And I say Pache Donald Knuth here because the great counterexamples include something like TeX. How many of you have used TeX or LaTeX? Not too many. You should check it out. It's pretty cool. Well, it's a typesetting system by the great computer scientist Donald Knuth. And to me, the cool thing about it, and the reason I dwell on it as a counterexample to change, he basically finished it, which is almost unheard of in what we do. When was the last time somebody said, I'm working on a web framework and it's finished? And not only is it's not obsolete, it's done. You can now use it for the next 35 years or whatever, right? Basically, TeX was done in, the mid-1980s, maybe, if I've got that right. And what's really interesting is Knuth, he won't change it except for bugs. If you send a bug report, he will correct the bug and release a new version. And he'll change the version number. The version number of TeX converges on pi. So it's 3.141 whatever, and whenever there's a bug report and he releases a new version, he adds a digit to the end of the thing. But that is an incredible example of something where there is not change, but it's an incredibly useful thing. So I think I don't want to quantify it by saying there's too much change or whatever. I think we could learn something from that. I mean, something about a project just being done, and that doesn't mean it's obsolete or sort of fossilized, but can actually be still a living thing. Anyway, that's sort of a sidebar, believe it or not. Change is the norm. Supersession is the norm, meaning you wake up every day and somebody says, "Oh, you're still using that? Haven't you heard that sucks now? You have, we've got the new one." And I know I'm being sort of, facetious, but it's true. I mean, constantly you hear, the greatest thing has arrived and we're all going to use it and it's going to, change our lives. And then what would you say, 6 months to 18 months later? What's the lifespan of the average, I don't know, tool or framework or approach to some technology? It varies, obviously. But a lot of the time, change is the one constant. When you look at the landscape, you see a kind of constant amount of this, repudiation of one technology and introduction of another technology. What the technologies are that are being repudiated and introduced will, of course, change. I mean, that's the whole point. But what I think of as kind of the coefficients remain similar, sort of the texture of the landscape, a certain amount of disgruntlement, a certain amount of celebration of new things, always seems to be pretty constant, whatever the specifics are. So going back to this idea of, are we generalists, are we specialists, what specific sort of concerns do we have to attach to that question? A first approximation is that we're generalists because we have to be. I mean, just try only using, I don't know, XML and one XML tool and never use any other programming languages. I mean, we really can't specialize in that sense. We can't really just say, I do X and that's it. We encounter these technologies to one extent or another, and of course, if you're on a team, you may sort of bounce different technologies to different people who have specific, further expertise or specialization. But really, everyone I know in this field is basically, at some level, a generalist of necessity. It's not impossible to specialize. I am, in a very real sense, a Ruby specialist because I happen to have kind of stumbled on Ruby and fallen in love with it, and I've written books about it, and I've organized conferences about it, and I've written a lot of programs in it, and I've taught it, and I've talked about it. So I mean, it would be wrong to say that Ruby doesn't loom, particularly large in my landscape. So I think it's certainly possible to specialize, but I think we're also, whether we want to be or not, we're also generalists. We're put in the position of being generalists at some level. So do we get to decide? Again, not really, because it sort of happens to us. It's not necessarily bad. I mean, I like the fact that I get to use a variety of tools and a variety of technologies. I wouldn't really want it any other way, but I didn't kind of decide that. I mean, they present themselves within projects, within teams, and so forth. So another question, this is sort of adapted from my initial list of questions at the beginning. Whichever we are, is it okay? I'd like to explore that question in a little bit more depth. Is it okay? Let's say the working hypothesis is that we're generalists because that's the texture of our field. That's sort of what we encounter, what encounters us day to day is a pretty broad range of technologies, many of which have little to do with each other. So it's not even just being, again, a generalist in the sense of doing lots of Ruby things. It's Ruby plus all these other technologies, and we all get involved in them to one extent or another. So assuming that's our hypothesis, that we can specialize, but we're basically put in the generalist position. It's interesting to think about how history has treated generalists. It's really a mixed bag. To start with the plus, the positive side, a phrase like Renaissance man that you hear, meaning somebody who does all these different things. And I mean, it's traditionally man. It obviously can be woman also. The sort of the cliche or the phrase has certainly got the word man in it for whatever historical or cultural reason. So you hear the phrase Renaissance man now and then, and it's based on the idea that the Renaissance man is someone who does a variety of things and does them all rather well. And somebody like Leonardo da Vinci would be kind of the zenith of this. But it's a compliment. It's praise. It's good. A word like polymath, which basically means, again, somebody who's knowledgeable or good at a number of different things, is essentially a term of praise. All-rounder, I think that's a term of praise. That may be a little less sort of extravagant in its praise. But if you say someone's an all-rounder, whether it be in sports or in life, you're basically saying something good about them. That they're well-rounded, they're well experienced in a number of things. Another phrase that kind of catches my ear is juggler. I actually Googled the phrase "he's a juggler" and the phrase "she's a juggler," and because I had this idea that, and it's sort of almost true, but that a lot of the time the word juggler is actually used non-literally, that it's used almost more to mean somebody who keeps a lot of balls in the air in life, kind of metaphorically, than somebody who actually juggles at parties or whatever. It's actually true. I mean, I also thought that might be more true for women because I just anecdotally, I kind of hear the phrase she's a juggler in my head more than he's a juggler, to mean she sort of juggles work and children and family and so forth. It's to me sort of a bit of a cliche. Anyway, the Google results were kind of semi-interesting, but it did show that it is used in that metaphorical way quite a bit. I mean, even within the top hits of those phrases. So the term juggler is definitely kind of in the vernacular, meaning somebody who manages a lot of different projects, a lot of different interests all at the same time. However, there is a minus column here. For every time someone gets called a Renaissance man, someone else may be called a dilettante, which basically means someone who does a lot of things badly. Someone who